The first question the alien woman asked when she woke up was, "Human man, what did you do to me?" The spacecraft crashed into the Earth with the subtlety of a piano dropped from orbit. Theo heard it before he saw it, a sonic boom, then a blast that shook the shelves in his garage and made 3 jars of pickled jalapenos do a synchronized death dive. His first thought wasn't aliens or government conspiracies or even checking for survivors. It was, great, now the Wi-Fi's gonna suck even more. It took him 15 minutes to get to the crater, mostly because he had to convince his neighbor Gerald that it wasn't a North Korean missile. Gerald had already started digging a bunker in his backyard with a spoon and an old can of peaches. Theo crouched at the edge of the crater, wind whipping sand into his eyes. Something metallic and cracked lay at the bottom, glowing faintly blue and humming with a high-pitched noise that sounded like a digital mosquito having an existential crisis. Inside, a figure moved. Okay, don't panic," he muttered to himself. "You've trained for this." "Well, you've watched Galaxy Raiders 17 times, which is basically the same." The cockpit glass had shattered, and tangled within the wires and sparking circuits was a woman. Almost. She looked human at first glance, but her ears were too long, curving like antennae that belonged in a space opera, and her skin shimmered faintly as though it was refusing to pick just one color. Theo didn't know whether to help her or salute. She blinked slowly, her eyes glowed, a swirling, iridescent mix of silver and violet. Her gaze locked on his face with a sudden clarity that made his breath hitch. "Human man," she said in a voice that sounded like a symphony being politely annoyed. "What did you do to me?" Theo opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again, possibly in that order. CPR? She tried to sit up, winced, and let out a sound like a furious modem. "This body is compromised. I sense interference, biostructural dissonance, and your face is aesthetically confusing." "Hey," he said, half of all vaguely handsome nerds. "You crash land on my planet, blow up my Wi-Fi, accuse me of what alien assault, and insult my face in the same breath? I did not inhale." She narrowed her eyes. "That phrase has multiple meanings, doesn't it?" He reached forward cautiously, slipping an arm around her shoulders. She felt warmer than she looked and lighter than he expected. "Look, Space Lady, you're injured. You need help. I have a garage, a coffee machine, and a first aid kit that hasn't expired, probably. Let's get you fixed up, and then you can resume yelling at me with full strength." She glared at him as he helped her up. "Do not patronize me, human. I am Cariel of the Ninvarali Ascendancy. I could disassemble you with thought alone. Yeah, well, until your telepathy gets back from lunch, you're stuck with Dr. Theo, expert in weird junk and questionable life choices." Dragging her across the sand was harder than it looked, not because she weighed much, but because she kept trying to walk on her own and cursing in what sounded like a language composed entirely of angry consonants. He finally got her into the garage, cleared a space between a disassembled 3D printer and a broken telescope, and laid her on his worn-out couch. "You smell like sadness and corn chips," she observed. "It's a scent I've been developing for years." She touched her temple, fingers trembling slightly. "There is a fracture, not physical, mental. Memories, something's missing. Someone took." Theo frowned, checking her vitals with a homemade scanner that looked like a glue gun attached to a tablet. "You've got neural interference. There's something lodged in your cortical array. It's like a memory loop was forcibly cut." She stared at the ceiling. "I remember light, heat, a voice, a decision." Her voice grew quiet. "You were there." His hand froze. "What?" "I remember your face, but you were different. Why? Or at least wearing less questionable clothing." He looked down at his alien cat t-shirt. "This is limited edition." Her gaze turned sharp again. "What did you do to me, human?" He exhaled slowly. "I didn't do this. We did." Cariel studied him for a long moment. "Unlikely. I do not trust you. You talk too much and use imprecise metaphors. I'll have you know I once got a B+ in advanced rhetoric. You just made that class up." He helped her sit upright, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Look, I don't know what happened. You fell out of the sky. You asked the creepiest question anyone's ever asked me while glowing ominously. And now I'm trying to keep you alive while secretly kind of terrified you'll turn into a laser squid." "I'm not a squid." "Good. That's step one." She slumped back. My energy cells are damaged. I require synthetol, magnesium, and a specific electromagnetic frequency to begin restoration. Theo blinked. I can get you 2 out of 3, but the frequency... I might have a karaoke machine? She stared. Hey, don't knock it till you've heard my rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody. I will knock it immediately and thoroughly. As night settled over the garage and the temperature dropped, Cariel's glow dimmed to a soft lavender. Theo tinkered with gadgets, cobbling together something that might amplify the required frequency using his old guitar amp and a speaker shaped like a pineapple. Cariel occasionally made corrections, mostly with groans, sighs, and insults delivered in a tone that could have frozen lava. Eventually, the device hummed to life. She leaned into the pulse of it, closing her eyes as faint currents of energy danced across her skin. Some color returned to her cheeks. Her long ears twitched. Theo watched her, arms crossed. So, we good? You're not going to vaporize me in my sleep? Her eyes opened. Uncertain, but I require more data, and you possess more of it than you realize. He raised an eyebrow. Like what? She tilted. Your blood smells like displaced time. That's either the weirdest compliment I've ever gotten or a serious medical issue. Outside, the night was unnaturally quiet. In the distance, a satellite realigned itself, unseen. In orbit, something metallic blinked to life. And inside the garage, 2 beings, one human, one very much not, shared a moment of mutual confusion, a little curiosity, and just enough accidental trust to cause a future catastrophe. Morning came with the smell of burnt coffee and soldered metal, which, for Theo, was the scent of productivity. Cariel had commandeered half his garage overnight, dragging cables and processors into constellations only she understood. She'd dismantled his microwave and was now using its spinning tray as a neural relay stabilizer, though it currently seemed to be spinning a half-eaten burrito. I was saving that, he muttered, eyeing the remains. Your food has less nutritional value than insulation foam, she replied, not looking up. And it's leaking. He sighed, sipping the bitter remains of the coffee that somehow always tasted like disappointment and motor oil. You know, you're not exactly a textbook house guest. I am not a guest, she said. I am a diplomat scientist of the Ascendancy, temporarily entangled in primitive planetary logistics. Right? My bad. Please enjoy the complimentary bath towel and loofah. She didn't laugh. He didn't expect her to. But her ears did twitch in what he was beginning to recognize as either amusement or a signal to detonate something. He leaned against the workbench, watching as she calibrated a sphere of crackling violet energy that hovered over the sink. So, we going to talk about the whole your blood smells like displaced time thing, or are we just pretending you were sleep-deprived and hallucinating? Cariel straightened, brushing a stray wire from her forehead. I don't hallucinate. I reconstruct dimensional echo. That's totally what I do when I eat too much wasabi. She paced across the floor, graceful even with a limp in her step. Your biology has been altered. There are quantum anomalies in your DNA, specifically in your introns, which I suspect were used as encrypted storage for something, possibly the DIM core. Theo blinked. The what now? She stopped pacing. A crystalline seed containing autonomous AI code capable of rewriting consensus law. It was meant to destabilize an entire regime of digital supremacy. I was carrying it when I fled Navarali space. It is dangerous, alive, possibly snarky. That last part's a guess, right? She narrowed her eyes. The last one we encountered attempted to rewrite a toaster into a god. Theo glanced nervously at his toaster, which had already been making weird noises during thunderstorms. So, if I've got this DIM core rattling around in my DNA, what does that make me? Cariel's mouth flattened. An accidental martyr, or a very sophisticated envelope. He gave a theatrical, always wanted to be both at once. Jules arrived mid-morning, crashing his rust-colored scooter into Theo's trash cans for the 3rd time this week. He burst in wearing a trench coat that looked like it had been stolen from a pirate-themed detective and carrying a duffel bag labeled EMP, definitely not drugs. Bro, he said dramatically, you did not tell me you had a glowing elf girl in your garage. Cariel frowned. I am not an elf. I'm a xenobiological sovereign with interstellar credentials. Jules nodded solemnly. Nice, I have a library card. Theo made introductions with minimal enthusiasm, and Cariel immediately deduced that Jules's value lay somewhere between comic relief and accidental genius. She tolerated him because his laptop was old enough to be invisible to modern tracking systems, and because he brought snacks. "All right, alien lady," Jules said between mouthfuls of pretzels. "You said there was a memory wipe? We talking neural block? External interface scramble? Mind meld gone bad?" Theo added. "Do people even still use the term mind meld, or is that cultural appropriation now?" Cariel was silent for a moment, then activated a nearby holographic projector using her wristband. A rotating diagram of a brain appeared, overlaid with unfamiliar symbols. "This is an Envirali memory lock, a consensual wipe designed to shield specific knowledge from all extraction methods, including psionics. It requires 2 participants." Theo stared. "You're saying we both agreed to forget something? Most likely the location of the dim core, or instructions on how to retrieve it. Why not write it down? Because paper is flammable, and humans are historically bad at not touching things labeled "do not touch." Jules nodded. "That tracks." They spent the afternoon digging through the backup drives in Theo's attic. Cariel was convinced he might have subconsciously hidden data before the wipe. Mostly they found old code libraries, a failed attempt at a dating sim that featured robotic raccoons, and one deeply disturbing folder labeled "Smooth Jazz Experiments, Do Not Open." Cariel opened it, immediately regretted it, didn't say why. Later, while Cariel rested inside the electromagnetic field she'd woven around the ceiling fan, Theo sat outside under the stars, Jules beside him, both sipping warm soda. "She's something else," Theo muttered. "You in love?" Jules grinned. "What, maybe? I mean, she insulted my brain architecture and weaponized my microwave. That's not exactly romantic. In your language, maybe not. In hers, that might be foreplay," Theo snorted. "It's not that. It's just, I look at her and feel like I already knew her. Like we've been through something big, but it's all out of reach. You sure it's not just déjà vu mixed with alien pheromones? I don't know. But if she's right, and I agreed to erase my memories, I must have known it was the only way." Back in the garage, alone now, she reached into the small compartment she'd built into the wall, pulling out a single fragment of crystal, no larger than a pebble. It pulsed once in her palm, not enough to activate, but enough to remind her it existed. She whispered something in Nivarali, a phrase laced with sorrow and quiet fury. Then she tucked the fragment away, stood, and walked over to the sleeping Theo. She stared at him for a long time, head tilted. "You don't remember," she murmured, "but you chose this." She returned to her corner of the garage. A message had been received on her wristband, one that bypassed every Earth-based signal. Just 4 words in an alien dialect that felt like a whisper behind the eyes. Theo woke up to the sound of something important short-circuiting, something else exploding in the sink, and the undeniable scent of waffles being cooked by someone who had no idea what a waffle actually was. He stumbled into the garage, hair askew, wearing a bathrobe with flamingos on it and 1 slipper. Cariel stood next to the waffle iron, now heavily modified with coils, wires, and a vaguely menacing glow. "I think that waffle just blinked at me," he said. "It is structurally unstable," Cariel replied, "but nutritionally relevant. I calibrated the protein conversion matrix to simulate Terran avian ova." "You hacked the waffle iron into making eggs?" "The process is imprecise." One exploded. The other gained sentience briefly. I extinguished it. Theo stared at her. "You really know how to start a morning." Cariel turned the iron off with a flick of her wristband. "I am adapting." They sat at his cluttered workbench, which was now halfway converted into a sort of cross-species command center. There was a holographic star chart pinned to one end with duct tape and energy drinks, and Theo's old gaming chair now doubled as a telemetry throne. I reviewed the fragments we extracted from the corrupted storage drive. There was an audio log. It's degraded, but your voice is clear. Theo raised an eyebrow. "Did I say anything smart?" "You called yourself Captain Cool Lightning and declared war on the kitchen sink." He winced. "That tracks." Jules arrived an hour later, wearing sunglasses indoors and a backpack that appeared to be humming. "I brought data, and possibly a black hole, depending on how this bag's behaving." Cariel scanned the backpack. "No singularities detected. Only something sticky. I dropped it in syrup. Don't judge me." They loaded Jules's stolen satellite logs into the garage's only functioning monitor, which blinked, hissed, then displayed a blurry heat map of Earth's orbit. "See this pattern?" Jules pointed. "Something entered high orbit 3 nights ago. Didn't come from Earth, didn't go through standard re-entry, just appeared." Cariel stepped forward, analyzing the data. "That's a phase veil signature." "Stealth field. Someone's watching." Theo muttered. "That's worse," Jules said. "They're cloaked using Neverali tech, same stuff Cariel's ship had." Cariel turned sharply. "Only military-grade units use those frequencies. If they've found me, us, then containment is no longer the goal." "Wait," Theo said, holding up a hand. "What does no longer the goal mean? What is the goal now?" "Erasure," she said, "of witnesses, evidence, possibly large portions of this hemisphere." Jules paled. "Could we maybe start with a cease and desist letter before we jump to vaporizing cities?" Cariel activated the garage door with a gesture, and they stepped outside. The sky was clear, too clear. The air felt like it had stopped breathing. "There," she said, pointing. A flicker of movement overhead, then gone. Theo shielded his eyes. "I swear something just blinked above us." "That is their scout vessel," Cariel said, "which means the main ship is nearby, possibly in low Earth orbit. Possibly underground? Theo asked. "Like buried under Walmart?" Back inside, they assembled a response plan that began with "don't panic" and rapidly devolved into "panic quietly" while building a signal disruptor. Theo supplied parts from his junk collection, a dehumidifier coil, an old radio, something labeled experimental toothbrush engine, and a glittery lava lamp. Cariel frowned. "Why is this here?" "That's my emotional support lava lamp." She didn't ask further. They worked all day, fueled by coffee, sarcasm, and increasingly absurd background music. Jules insisted on playing. At one point, Space Hamster Boogie looped for 45 minutes before anyone noticed. By evening, the disruptor stood wobbling on a tripod made of bicycle frames and an ironing board. Cariel connected it to her wristband, muttered something in Virali, and hit the activation rune. The machine hummed, then sparked, then beeped in a series of ascending tones that sounded suspiciously like a question. "It's asking for permission to speak," Cariel said. Theo blinked. "We built a polite disruptor? It is partially sapient. That was not intentional." "I like it," Jules said. "Let's call it Beepy." Cariel sighed. "Fine. Beepy is now interfacing with the cloaked vessel's perimeter field. If it works, we will reveal their ship's location for 10 seconds. Then they will likely attempt to disintegrate us." Jules raised a hand. "Do we have a step after that?" Theo answered. "Panic again?" Beepy chirped and launched a pulse. Above them, the sky shimmered, just for a moment. A massive, angular shadow appeared like an oil stain across the stars, then vanished. "I've seen that shape before," Cariel whispered. "That's not just any ship. That's her." Theo's stomach dropped. "Who's her?" Cariel turned, her expression unreadable. "Admiral Varel, my former mentor, the architect of the core program. She trained me, then tried to kill me," Jules said. "So basically a sci-fi mom?" Cariel stared at him. "She once atomized a man for sneezing near her." Theo swallowed. "Sounds strict." They returned to the garage in silence. Outside, the crickets chirped. Inside, a machine named Beepy quietly sang lullabies in binary. Cariel sat cross-legged on the floor, reaching into her pocket to retrieve the crystal fragment she had hidden. It pulsed, once. She glanced at Theo. "We're out of time," she said softly. "The core is inside you, and soon they'll know it too." He looked at her for a long moment, then at his cluttered lab, the chaos of wires and tools, the strange calm before whatever came next. "I'd really hoped," he said, "that if aliens ever came for me, it'd be because I won some kind of intergalactic karaoke contest." She tilted her head. "You have a very optimistic view of your singing. That's what makes it heroic." Beepy exploded at 2:14 a.m. The sound was less of a boom and more of a very dignified pop, followed by a puff of lavender smoke and the faint sound of elevator music. Theo shot upright on the couch, nearly knocking over his cereal bowl full of gummy worms in regret. "Please tell me that wasn't the polite disruptor," he mumbled. Cariel was already kneeling beside the charred remains, her fingers glowing faintly as she scanned the fragments. Beepy attempted to interface with a command signal from the cloaked vessel. Its ethics processor objected to espionage. So it self-destructed out of guilt? It left a farewell message. Jules poked his head in from the garage entrance, holding a half-eaten donut. It said sorry and played the first 3 notes of Moonlight Sonata, I think it was a cry for help. Theo sighed and rubbed his temples. We built a sentient disruptor with anxiety. I don't know if I should be impressed or concerned. Cariel stood. The good news is BP's last transmission contained a partial encryption signature from Varel's ship. If I can decrypt it, I may be able to locate her core node. Theo perked up. And by core node, you mean the brain, right? The thinking hub, the alien Wi-Fi router. I mean the interface that controls all her remote systems, including memory archives. If we can access it, we might recover what we deleted from ourselves. Jules raised a finger. Or we could just not. I mean, have we considered the perks of selective amnesia? Ignorance is bliss. I haven't filed taxes in 6 years and I sleep great. Cariel ignored him. She activated the projector and brought up a 3D star map, filled with a dense web of orbiting satellites, debris, and unregistered anomalies. One node blinked in crimson. That is where she's hiding, in the husk of an abandoned comms relay in geostationary orbit. Theo stared. How do we get up there? It's not like I have a spaceship parked behind the compost bin. Cariel tapped a wrist control, and a small hologram of her ship appeared. Charred, cracked, and very much missing most of its left wing. I can repair my vessel. Barely. It will fly. Possibly explode mid-ascent. Likely both. Theo raised his hand. Can we vote for less explode, more fly? She began outlining repair protocols, listing things like zero-point adhesives, ion pulse stabilizers, and a very specific type of glue only found in vending machines in Belgium. Jules, to everyone's surprise, produced a roll of what looked like duct tape covered in alien runes. I won it in a conspiracy forum trivia night, he explained. Had to name all 17 moons of Nargul. Cariel took the tape without a word, possibly out of awe, more likely out of resignation. For the next 12 hours, they worked non-stop. The ship, parked in the hollowed-out trench behind the garage, groaned with every patch and weld. Theo helped realign its gravitic field generator using jumper cables and a bike pedal. Jules tried to install a cup holder and was immediately banned from further contribution. Cariel rewired the ship's AI core using parts of a voice-activated blender. When it powered up, it greeted them with, "Welcome, Cariel. Please state your smoothie preference." She rolled her eyes. Override protocol. Initiate stealth flight path to orbital relay node Epsilon K. The blender AI replied, "Processing. Also, banana mango is optimal for interstellar stress reduction." Theo whispered, "I like it. Let's call it Blendy." Jules clapped. "Rip beepy. Long live Blendy." The launch window opened at 3:07 a.m. The ship trembled, lights flickering across its hull. Theo and Cariel strapped in. Jules waved dramatically from below, wearing a colander on his head and saluting like a confused marching band conductor. "You guys got this," he said. "Also, I'm keeping the cat. Temporarily." Theo blinked. "I don't own a cat." Jules disappeared into the garage. The engines ignited. The ascent was not smooth. At 30,000 feet, they hit turbulence so violent. Theo bit his tongue hard enough to taste regret. At 50,000, the ship's oxygen generator asked politely if they could share a vent. At orbit, everything went silent, except for the sound of Theo humming to keep himself from passing out. Then the relay came into view. A massive skeletal structure floated against the backdrop of Earth's curvature. Twisted antennae, broken solar panels, and a single blinking signal node. The place looked like a haunted satellite had a midlife crisis. Cariel guided the ship alongside, connecting via a manual docking arm. Her node is deep inside, protected by drones, possibly sentient firewalls, possibly passive-aggressive UI prompts. Theo geared up, slipping on an environmental suit that hadn't been tested since the Clinton administration. Cariel handed him a plasma cutter. In case of emergency, aim for the core, or the sarcasm module. They entered the relay. The interior was cold and dead. Lights flickered in sequences, like blinking eyes trying to remember how to see. Cariel led the way, bypassing half the systems with her wristband, while Theo struggled to avoid floating into walls like a particularly awkward balloon. Finally, they reached the core chamber. A spherical interface pulsed slowly in the center. Around it, drones hung dormant in midair. Cariel approached cautiously. "This is it, her memory archive. If we connect, we risk exposure." Theo exhaled. "Let's do it." She placed her palm on the node. The room lit up in brilliant silver. Images surged around them, fragments of the erased memory, plans, the dim core, a promise, a kiss, a final decision. Then came the voice. "Well, well," said a smooth, cold tone. "I always suspected you'd come back, Cariel. How disappointingly predictable." Admiral Varel's face formed in the center of the sphere. Her eyes were sharp as data spikes. Her smile was a threat wrapped in velvet code. "You were always too sentimental," she said, "too human." Cariel stepped forward. "You're violating every code you helped create. The core belongs to no one." "Oh, I disagree," Varel replied. "It belongs to whoever survives what comes next." The drones activated. Theo sighed, lifting the plasma cutter. "I knew this suit smelled like final boss level." Cariel drew her weapon. "Stay behind me." No chance. And then the battle began. Theo ducked just as a drone fired a plasma bolt that vaporized a chunk of wall exactly where his head had been. "Just for the record," he yelled, "I never agreed to fight space murderbots today." Cariel spun with surgical precision, hurling an energy disk that cut through two drones like scissors through existential dread. "Then consider this your impromptu hero internship." Theo grunted, rolled behind a console, and accidentally elbowed a button that activated a soothing elevator jingle. "Okay, I'm going to be really honest right now. I'm not built for orbital warfare. My idea of intense conflict is arguing with vending machines. Then stop pressing things and override the drone sequence. I don't know how. These controls are in. Wait, are these written in cursive Klingon? Side language of the Enverali," Cariel snapped, deflecting another shot. "It's not cursive, it's ceremonial script. Focus." Theo took a deep breath and tapped into the rhythm of the interface. His fingers flew across keys in a pattern that vaguely resembled someone swatting at bees with hope. On the fourth try, the drones froze mid-attack and slowly descended to the floor with a soft mechanical sigh. He looked up, stunned. "Did I just—" "You did," Cariel said. "You accessed her override layer." "Cool. I did something cool. My obituary's going to be way more interesting now." The spherical core dimmed, then brightened again. Varel's image reappeared, her digital projection now flickering slightly, like a corrupted hologram. "Well done," she said. "Unfortunately for you both, that was only the warm-up." Cariel stepped forward. "End this, Varel. You've already lost control." "You think control matters? The dim core is inside him. I don't need control. I need extraction." The chamber shook violently. A beam fired down from orbit, slicing through the relay's understructure. Alarms blared in 3 languages, none of which were comforting. Theo stumbled, catching himself on the railing. Cariel gritted her teeth. "She's trying to destabilize the relay and force ejection of the core. If we stay here, the pressure spike could rupture your cellular matrix." Translation? Your insides become your outsides. Got it. Definitely don't want that. The floor panels began to fracture. Theo looked at Cariel, eyes wide. "Can we move the core?" She hesitated. "Only if you agree, and only if I take it into myself. It would merge with my systems, permanently." "What does that mean for you?" "It means I stop being Cariel. I become something else. Maybe better. Maybe not." Theo looked at her, really looked, at the person who had crash-landed into his life, fried his toaster, insulted his t-shirts, and slowly, weirdly, completely rewritten what his heart understood about connection. "Do it!" Cariel stepped close, her hands gently resting on his temples. "It'll hurt. I've stubbed my toe on Lego at 2 a.m. I'm ready." Light surged between them, not blinding, but deep, like the universe had flipped a page. Theo gasped as something ancient, strange, and oddly sarcastic whispered through his bloodstream. His body lifted off the floor for a moment, then dropped with a very undramatic thud. Cariel glowed, the crystal fragment in her hand fusing with the pulse of energy transferring from him. The relay core responded, unlocking a final protocol. Varel's hologram flickered, now clearly worried. "What did you do?" she demanded. Cariel's voice was different now, calmer, layered, deeper. "We did what you couldn't. We trusted." Varel screamed as the memory chamber collapsed in a swirl of light. The override initiated a failsafe that purged her control from the node, disassembling her presence into fragmented code. The drones powered down for good. Theo groaned from the floor. "So, what'd I miss?" Cariel helped him up. Her eyes shimmered with unfamiliar brilliance, and her long ears had shifted, now lined with microcrystals. "I have the core. It accepted me." "Accepted?" "It liked my sense of purpose and my sarcasm." "Well," he said, smiling, "then you two are going to get along just fine." They launched from the crumbling relay as it began to collapse in on itself, scattering debris into the orbit like cosmic confetti. The ship barely held together during re-entry, sparking and wheezing like a broken air fryer, but it made it. When they landed in the desert, Jules was waiting with a sandwich, 3 energy drinks, and a sign that said, "Welcome back from Alien Death Battle." "I guessed the font size wrong," he said. "I was aiming for dramatic." Cariel stepped out of the ship, her glow now subtle, controlled. She looked around, nodded at the sign, and said, "We did not die. Acceptable outcome." Theo leaned on the hull. "So what now?" Cariel looked to the stars. "Now I leave." His face fell. "Eventually," she added. Jules pumped a fist. "Yes! I get to keep the weirdest roommate combo alive." Cariel stepped closer to Theo. "There will be others, more like Varel. But I have the core now, and I'm not alone." Theo smiled. "No, you're not." She touched his shoulder, then looked at the garage. "I will require more tools, possibly a toaster upgrade." "Done. And maybe dinner? Not as an alien-human treaty thing. As a, dinner. She paused. "Is there dessert?" "Yeah, something called cheesecake." "You'll love it." She nodded once. "Then I accept your primitive courtship ritual." Jules made a choked laugh sneeze and wandered back into the garage, mumbling something about interspecies sitcom. That night, as stars bloomed overhead and satellites quietly changed their trajectories far above, Cariel sat beside Theo on the roof of the garage, her glow subtle, her presence oddly warm. "You're different," she said. He nodded. "So are you. Do you miss what we forgot?" "Not really. We made new memories. Weird, awesome, slightly traumatic ones." "Agreed." They sat in silence, comfortable now. Above them, the cosmos watched. Below, BP's backup core beeped softly from inside a toolbox. Everything somehow felt exactly as it should. The end.